Amid the blazing fervor of the Cultural Revolution and the fiery ambitions of the arduous Great Leap Forward, Mao Zedong emerges as a figure both grand and deeply contradictory, one who ignited the revolutionary flame, yet also unleashed storms that shattered the dreams of a nation. During these turbulent years, China underwent profound upheaval, where lofty ideals faced the harshest trials, and Mao's decisions altered the destiny of hundreds of millions.
The article below has been compiled from many sources. If there are any mistakes, or if you know any interesting information, feel free to leave a comment so I can learn as well. Now, let's begin the article.
Childhood of Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong was born on December 26, 1893, in Shaoshan Village, Xiangtan County, Hunan Province, a land both fertile and harsh. His father, Mao Shuntai, was a wealthy farmer with a stern and strict nature toward his children. His mother, Wen Sumei, was a gentlewoman, devout in Buddhism and full of compassion. From an early age, Mao lived amid the contrast between his father's iron hand and his mother's tender embrace. A duality that seemed to plant in the young boy's soul the ability to see both the harsh and the gentle sides of life. Mao's childhood was far from peaceful. He was soon put to labor in the fields, plowing deep, cutting rice, herding buffalo, enduring the blazing sun and freezing winters. Yet it was these years closely tied to the earth and sweat that deeply imprinted the image of the peasant in him, the very class he later believed would become the foundation of the revolution. At the village school, Mao was not always a model student confined to the rigid norms of Confucian teachings. He preferred stories of heroes, peasant uprisings, and figures like Yue Fei and Hong Xiuquan to the dry, classical Confucian texts. After school, Mao often spent hours by the rice paddies or riverbanks, reading books borrowed from his teacher, or small shops in the county market. As he grew older, Mao was sent to a county middle school, where he began encountering reformist and democratic ideas spreading from the reform movement and the Xinhai Revolution. His dissatisfaction with the state of the country, torn apart by foreign powers and a decaying Qing dynasty, gradually shaped in him a determined will to change China's destiny by a path unlike any before him. Youth and first steps on the revolutionary path. Mao Zedong's teenage years unfolded amid a China full of turmoil. In 1911, when Mao had just turned 18, the gunfire of the Wuchang Uprising ignited the flame of the Xinhai Revolution. The news spread to Hunan, shaking every village and town. Mao, then studying at the Hunan Normal School, was immediately swept up in the whirlpool of the times. Although he did not fight directly in major battles, Mao volunteered with a local militia, handling logistics and transportation. For the first time, he witnessed the power of the masses rising up, but also saw the chaos and divisions within the ranks of those calling themselves revolutionaries. While the Xinhai Revolution succeeded in overthrowing the Qing dynasty, it handed power over to warlords and opportunistic politicians. This planted a deep skepticism in Mao. Revolution could not stop at changing dynasties. It had to transform the very structure of society. In 1913, Mao returned to normal school, where he studied pedagogy, history, and literature, but also began reading Western works on his own. He immersed himself in Rousseau, Montesquieu, Adam Smith, and was particularly fascinated by stories of the French Revolution. The most profound influence, however, came from democratic and scientific ideas spread by Chen Duxiu's New Youth magazine, a publication that became the banner of the May 4th movement. During this period, Mao made friends and engaged in lively debates with young intellectuals in Hunan. They formed reading groups discussing democracy, women's rights, universal education, and new social models that were still considered radical in China. At the end of 1918, after graduating from Hunan Normal School, Mao left his hometown and boarded a train that crossed mountain ranges and the Yellow River to reach Beijing, the former Qing dynasty capital, now the political center of the Beiyang government. Mao's initial goal was not to find a prestigious position, but simply a job to live on. With help from a former teacher, Jiang Monglin, he found a modest job at the library of Peking University. Though seemingly mundane, this job opened a vast treasure trove of knowledge. At that time, Peking University was not just an educational institution, but the headquarters of progressive Chinese thought. Figures like Chen Duxiu, Li Dazhao, Hu Shi, and Lu Xun frequently gave lectures and debated democracy, science, and newly introduced socialist theories. With curious eyes and keen observation, Mao quietly listened to every talk, took notes on each argument, and paid particular attention to the lectures of Li Dazhao, the pioneer of Marxism in China. Li Dazhao left a profound impression on Mao, a Western-educated intellectual who did not merely dream, but was determined to apply Marxism to liberate the nation. Under Li's influence, Mao began reading the Communist Manifesto, Das Kapital, and Lenin's revolutionary writings. Communism was no longer a distant theory, but gradually emerged as a roadmap to solve both class oppression and foreign invasion. Though Mao stayed in Beijing only briefly, he built a small network of like-minded young intellectuals. They exchanged views on post-October Revolution Russia and discussed how to apply the dictatorship of the proletariat to China's context. However, economic difficulties made it impossible for Mao to remain in Beijing long. Early in 1919, he left the capital, carrying with him Marxist books, a mind full of ideas, and the belief that socialist revolution was the way out for the country. Returning to Hunan, igniting the revolutionary flame. In 1920, after months of learning and experience in Beijing, Mao Zedong returned to his homeland in Hunan. The countryside remained much the same, with endless rice fields, humble thatched cottages, and the gentle Xiang River flowing through. But inside Mao, everything had changed. The young man who once only dreamed of becoming a teacher now carried a new fire within him, the fire of revolution. Mao returned with eyes shining bright with conviction. He began organizing secret meetings with friends, former students, and young patriotic intellectuals. Together, they discussed Marxism, the future of the country, and how to overthrow the old oppressive regime that weighed heavily on the people's shoulders. Mao did not speak in dry theories alone. He used everyday stories and the hardships of peasants to turn communist ideas into a tangible hope. At Hunan Normal School, the very place where he had once studied, Mao started sowing the first seeds of revolution. He founded the Xiang River Society, a group of progressive intellectuals who debated social reform strategies. He also opened a small library and bookstore in Changsha, selling not only Marx-Lenin literature, but also spreading advanced works of literature, history, and political theory. Mao's talks attracted growing audiences, from students and teachers to peasants. He traveled to villages, listening to people recount the heavy taxes, corrupt officials, and promised them a day when peasants would take power into their own hands. This period was when Mao clearly shaped the path he would follow. that of a lifelong revolutionary devoted to the people. And Hunan, the land of his birth, nurtured both his soul and ideals before he stepped into the greater storms of history. Joining the party, a step on the point of no return. In the summer of 1921, in a modest small room at 106 Huangpu Street, Shanghai, a group of young intellectuals secretly gathered. They were the first to believe in a new ideal, building a country free from oppression and injustice based on Marxist-Leninist thought. Among them was Mao Zedong, the sharp-eyed and strong-voiced young man from Hunan, who for the first time signed his name to the list of members of an organization destined to change China's fate, the Communist Party of China. Though unable to attend fully the party's founding congress in Shanghai and later in Jiaxing, Mao was tasked with representing the revolutionary movement in Hunan. At that time, the party was only a few dozen members, operating secretly, constantly at risk of suppression. But in Mao's heart, he knew he had crossed a threshold of no return, a path ahead filled with storms, blood, and sacrifice. Back in Hunan, Mao threw himself into building the party's base. He organized secret study groups, translated and distributed communist literature, and trained the first core members. Mao believed that for the revolution to succeed, it had to start with awakening the masses, especially the peasants, who were the majority but long regarded as lowly in society. Nighttime meetings, handwritten leaflets, and walking tens of kilometers to meet peasants all became Mao's daily rhythm. He was not just a theorist, but a persistent propagandist, patiently sowing seeds of hope. Joining the party was not merely a political choice. It was Mao Zedong's solemn oath to the revolutionary ideal. From here, his path would lead straight into the eye of history's storm, where he would be both a wave-maker and a challenger of all that had existed for thousands of years in China. The flame amidst the mud, Mao and the Workers-Peasants movement. By this time, Mao Zedong, already an active cadre of the Communist Party, recognized that the key to revolution lay in uniting these two forces, the workers and the peasants. Unlike many comrades who still focused on the intellectual class and urban workers, Mao deeply understood that the peasants, those with hands stained by mud, were the backbone of Chinese society. In 1922, Mao was assigned to Guangzhou to work with trade unions. There, he witnessed firsthand the brutal exploitation of workers, laboring more than a dozen hours daily in sweltering factories, receiving meager wages, and living in squalid slums. Mao not only delivered speeches and wrote leaflets, but also actively participated in strikes. He learned to speak briefly and clearly to ignite passion in those who had never been taught to read. The workers' movements in Guangzhou, Hong Kong, and especially the Beijing-Hankou railway strike became Mao's practical schools, where he realized that solidarity and tight organization could transform scattered crowds into an irresistible force. In 1925, after years of activity in major cities, Mao returned to his hometown in Hunan. He observed that peasants there remained oppressed by local tyrants, as they had been for centuries, burdened by heavy taxes, trapped in usurious debts, dispossessed of land and dignity. Mao began traveling through villages, talking with peasants, meticulously recording their stories and grievances. This resulted in the 1927 Report on the Peasant Movement in Hunan, a classic document in which Mao boldly declared, "Peasants are the greatest revolutionary force in China." This report not only shocked the party internally, but also challenged the traditional view that peasants were backward and unorganized. During this period, the Communist Party of China cooperated with the Kuomintang in the First United Front, 1924 to 1927, to fight warlords and imperialists. Mao held various roles in the propaganda and organizational apparatus of both parties. However, in 1927, when Chiang Kai-shek launched the April 12 Purge in Shanghai, brutally massacring thousands of Communist Party members and workers, the situation changed dramatically. Bloodshed stained the streets. Many of Mao's comrades were killed or arrested. This event marked the dissolution of the United Front and pushed Mao and his comrades onto the path of armed struggle. That same autumn in 1927, in Jinggangshan County, Hunan Province, Mao led an armed uprising known as the Autumn Harvest Uprising. This was not merely a military action, but symbolized the transformation of the Chinese Revolution from political struggle to armed struggle, relying on the peasant force. Though small in scale, the uprising had a powerful resonance. Mao and his comrades gathered oppressed peasants into small guerrilla units employing flexible surprise tactics. They knew every path and stream in the mountainous forests of southeastern Hunan, a precious advantage against the regular, modernly armed Kuomintang forces. During those days, Mao was not just a commander, but an inspirer. He told the peasant soldiers, "We do not have big guns or large numbers, but we have perseverance, courage, and love for this very land." Despite this, the Autumn Harvest Uprising was soon crushed by the overwhelming strength of the Kuomintang. But the lessons and spirit from it were never lost. Mao retreated to the mountains, continued building forces, reorganized guerrilla units, and outlined a long-term war strategy based on peasants, the foundation of the revolutionary strategy he would later apply thoroughly. Building the revolutionary base, the fateful step of the revolution. After the failure of the Autumn Harvest Uprising in 1927, Mao Zedong did not lose heart, but resolutely decided to deepen into the countryside, where he believed a strong revolutionary base could be built. The mountainous forests of southeastern Hunan became the first home of the Red Army, the revolutionary military force under his command. Here, Mao gathered oppressed peasants, taught them how to use weapons, organized military discipline, and established a political system based on grassroots democracy. He was not only a military commander, but also an inspirer, a teacher, and a friend to his soldiers. Each soldier heard him remind them, "We fight not for personal power, but to liberate the nation and the people from oppression." Mao also established revolutionary base areas, zones controlled by the revolution that served both as military bases and experimental grounds for land reform policies and social reorganization. In these areas, peasants had land redistributed, gained self-management rights, and participated actively in revolutionary work. Despite facing resistance from the Kuomintang army and anti-revolutionary forces, Mao and his comrades steadfastly held their ground and gradually expanded their forces. Repeated small but effective guerrilla attacks continually paralyzed enemy bases, laying the groundwork for larger campaigns to come. During these years, Mao began developing his military thought, emphasizing the people as the root, that war must rely on the masses, the use of flexible guerrilla tactics, and the exploitation of terrain. Basic principles that would ultimately lead the Chinese Revolution to success. Entering the 1930s, the Red Army under Mao's command faced tremendous pressure from the Kuomintang forces. Continuous suppression campaigns, modern weapons, and superior enemy numbers pushed the revolutionary bases in Hunan and Jiangxi into a perilous situation. However, with resilient spirit and tactical flexibility, Mao proposed shifting guerrilla warfare into a bold, large-scale strategic retreat to preserve forces. This decision marked the beginning of the Long March, a grueling journey spanning over 9,000 kilometers through treacherous mountains and forests, lasting nearly a year. Throughout the march, the Red Army soldiers faced harsh nature, disease, hunger, and relentless pursuit by Kuomintang troops. But Mao's sharp leadership, unity spirit, and steadfast determination kept the revolutionary flame alive. The Long March was not only a monumental retreat, but also an opportunity for Mao to consolidate his leadership and rebuild the organization. He began refining his theory of people's war, building forces based on the consensus and trust of the masses. Preparing for the general offensive, the final years before seizing power. After the great and arduous Long March, Mao Zedong and his comrades gradually rebuilt their forces and consolidated a new revolutionary base area in Yan'an, Shaanxi province. This period was crucial not only for restoring military strength, but also for shaping the distinctive leadership ideology and strategy that bore Mao's hallmark. In Yan'an, Mao focused on establishing a new style of local government that promoted grassroots democracy, while vigorously advancing land reform campaigns to attract and strengthen the trust of the peasants. Mass mobilization campaigns encouraged people's participation in social management, creating a solid political foundation for the nationwide revolution to come. Mao continuously refined his military doctrine, emphasizing the role of people's war, relying on the support and active involvement of the broad masses in logistics, intelligence, and combat. At the same time, he advocated guerrilla tactics, skillfully using rugged mountainous terrain to gain advantage against forces superior in weaponry and numbers. On the international stage, the years from 1937 to 1945 witnessed the outbreak of the Sino-Japanese War. Mao and the Chinese Communist Party quickly recognized the opportunity presented by the anti-Japanese resistance. They established a united front against fascism, simultaneously fighting the invading forces and building up the party's strength and influence among the populace. The war against Japan became a period of military training and increased prestige for Mao and the Communist Party in the hearts of the people. Military units like the Chinese People's Liberation Army were reorganized and strengthened, contributing to significant military victories. Meanwhile, land reform policies and development of education and healthcare in liberated areas created a new model of a just and democratic society. After Japan's defeat in 1945, the Chinese Civil War between the Kuomintang and the Communist Party resumed. During this phase, Mao employed a strategy of protracted warfare, securing the broad support of peasants and the masses, and gradually turning the tide. Large-scale military campaigns were launched from central South China to the northeast, severely weakening Kuomintang forces. Not only on the battlefield, but also as a keen political strategist, Mao skillfully leveraged international conditions, garnering support from the Soviet Union and global communist movements, while tightly controlling internal affairs to maintain party unity. Finally, in 1949, after many years of persistent and challenging struggle, Mao Zedong proclaimed the founding of the People's Republic of China at Tiananmen Square, a great historical milestone that ushered in a new era for the Chinese nation. Building the new nation. Mao Zedong's major policies and initial challenges. After proclaiming the founding of the People's Republic of China on October 1, 1949, Mao Zedong faced an immense mission: to rebuild a nation shattered by nearly a century of continuous wars, civil strife, and foreign invasions. In the early years of his rule, Mao and the Chinese Communist Party implemented a series of policies aimed at stabilizing the country, constructing a new socio-economic foundation, and consolidating the party's absolute leadership. One of the earliest and most revolutionary steps was the land reform policy. Mao understood that to secure the unwavering support of the peasants, the largest social group, it was essential to eliminate the feudal landlord class that had exploited them for centuries. This policy involved confiscating land from landlords and redistributing it to poor peasants, alongside organizing revolutionary trials to prosecute oppressors. Struggle sessions against landlords spread widely, with direct participation from the masses. Although controversial and accompanied by significant losses, land reform marked a turning point, granting peasants ownership rights and becoming a solid rear base for the revolution. To develop the country, Mao and other leaders focused on a centrally planned economy, a model with the state at the core of resource allocation and production control. Heavy industry was prioritized, and the state-owned enterprise system was gradually established. While initially successful in stabilizing industrial production and improving people's living standards, this model also brought difficulties such as low labor productivity, inefficiency, and a lack of innovation due to bureaucratic systems. Mao did not focus solely on the economy, but also launched multiple political campaigns to strengthen power and secure the Communist Party's leadership. Campaigns like anti-rightist and mass mobilization were vigorously implemented with the goal of eliminating opposition elements and building a new consensus society. During this process, various social classes were tightly controlled, and those suspected of dissent or not following the revolutionary line could face harsh punishments. By the late 1950s, Mao initiated the People's Commune movement to collectivize agriculture, aiming to build an ideal communist society based on cooperative labor and shared benefits. Simultaneously, the Great Leap Forward campaign, 1958 to 1961, was launched to transform China from an underdeveloped agrarian country into an industrial power within a few years. However, these policies had severe consequences. Agricultural output plummeted catastrophically, famine spread widely, and millions died of starvation during what became one of the greatest humanitarian disasters of the 20th century. In the early 1960s, after the failures of the Great Leap Forward, Mao faced criticism within the party and from other leadership factions. To consolidate his position, he launched the Cultural Revolution in 1966, an extreme campaign aimed at purging reactionary elements and safeguarding the revolutionary spirit within the party and society. The Cultural Revolution lasted a decade, causing profound chaos across all aspects of social life. Education was disrupted, the economy stagnated, millions were tortured and imprisoned, and a whole generation lost educational opportunities. The end of an era. Mao Zedong, the architect of a new era for China, became a symbol of resilience, willpower, and the aspiration to transform a nation once mired in suffering and division. His life, with its ups and downs, achievements, and controversies, left a deep imprint on modern world history. Despite mistakes and costly lessons, it cannot be denied that thanks to Mao's vision and determination, China overcame seemingly insurmountable challenges, rising from ruins to become a powerful nation with global influence. The story of Mao Zedong is not only the story of one man, but of a nation, of a turbulent era, and of an unceasing journey toward the future. From this point, Chinese history turned a new page, to be continued by succeeding generations with their own dreams and aspirations.
Thank you all for following and listening. If you enjoyed and found it interesting, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay tuned for our upcoming videos.